Tonight, you are the richest man in Japan, a powerful lord with great lands and fortune. But it's not all luxury and ease. You must keep your family safe by staying in the capital part of the year, manage endless taxes, and navigate court politics where one move could cost you everything. Think you can handle this life? Let's see how long you last. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like a video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see who's joining us. Now dim the lights, close your eyes and get comfortable. We're getting started. Welcome to Japan, year 1650. You just woke up as one of the richest men in the country. Your word is absolute law within your domain. But you cannot repair your own castle without government permission. The shogunate controls everything. Who you marry, who you meet, where you travel. Even the color of your clothing is regulated by written law. This is the reality of being a daimyo, a feudal military lord in Tokugawa, Japan. Your title comes with land that produces enough rice to feed hundreds of thousands of people. You command thousands of samurai warriors. You live in a castle with walls thick enough to withstand cannon fire. In Europe, men with this much power would be called kings. In Japan, you are called something else, a controlled asset. Because in the early 17th century, the Tokugawa shogunate created a system. A brilliant system designed to prevent civil war by controlling men exactly like you. Rich men, powerful men, dangerous men. The system has a name. Sankin-kotai, alternate attendants. Here is how it works. You must maintain 2 complete residences. One in your home domain. One in Edo, the shogun's capital. And you must alternate between them. 1 year in Edo, 1 year at home, back and forth, forever. While you alternate, your family does not. They must remain in Edo permanently. The government calls this an honor. Everyone knows what it really is, a guarantee of your loyalty. But you cannot simply walk to Edo. The law specifies exactly how large your traveling procession must be. Dozens of samurai, hundreds of attendants, porters, guards, servants. The journey takes weeks. For the most distant domains, it takes months. And one round trip consumes between 1/3 and half of your annual revenue. This is not accidental. The system was designed to drain wealth, not through taxation, through obligation. You spend your time traveling and your money on processions. You have no resources left to build armies or fund rebellions. The constant movement prevents you from consolidating power. The separation from family prevents you from establishing secure dynasties. And the surveillance in Edo prevents you from forming dangerous alliances. The shogunate employs inspectors who monitor every daimyo residence in the capital. They track who visits whom. They note which lords socialize together. They file reports on spending patterns and suspicious conversations. The surveillance is comprehensive and constant. The consequences for disobedience are absolute. Lose everything. Lands, title, wealth, samurai retainers. When a daimyo falls, his family name disappears from the registers of power. The shogunate has stripped hundreds of families of their domains over the centuries. But here is what makes the system remarkable. It works. For over 2 centuries, Japan experiences almost no major civil wars. Compare this to the previous era, when the country was in near constant warfare for generations. Domains fought domains. Castles changed hands regularly. Alliances formed and collapsed within months. Your grandfather fought in those wars. He chose the winning side at the Battle of Sekigahara, the battle that ended the age of warfare. As a reward, he received these lands. For decades, he governed with relative independence. Then came the formalization of sankin-kotai. Everything changed. He had to build a second residence in Edo. He had to send your grandmother, and your father to live there permanently. He had to begin the yearly migrations. Your father inherited that system. You inherited that system. Your son will inherit that system. 3 generations living the same constrained existence. Wealthy on paper, controlled in practice. The irony is that many daimyo go into debt despite owning vast territories. Merchants in the major cities loan money to lords at interest. The lords need the loans to fund their mandatory processions and maintain their Edo residences. The merchants grow wealthy while the military aristocracy grows poorer. The social hierarchy says that merchants are the lowest class. The economic reality is very different. The shogunate also issued detailed codes of conduct. The Buk Shahado, laws that regulate every aspect of daimyo life. You cannot build or repair castle fortifications without approval. You cannot arrange marriages between powerful families without notification. You cannot gather with other lords without oversight. Even your clothing is regulated. Specific colors and fabrics are reserved for specific ranks. The system is comprehensive. The system is brilliant. The system is effective. It creates peace through obligation, stability through surveillance, order through controlled spending, and it will last until the entire structure collapses in a single year during the Meiji Restoration. But that is 2 centuries in your future. Right now, in 1650, the system is at its peak. The regulations are total. The surveillance is constant. The control is absolute. You wake in a castle decorated with gold. Servants maintain your household. Rice fields stretch to the horizon. All of it belongs to you. None of it makes you free. You cannot choose where you live. You cannot decide when you see your family. You cannot repair your own walls without permission. You cannot marry without approval. You cannot socialize without surveillance. You own everything except autonomy. This is the golden cage of the Tokugawa period, an actual legal and economic structure designed to control the most powerful people in Japan without destroying them. It transforms wealth into obligation, power into performance, independence into surveillance. Let me explain why this system emerged. For over a century before the Tokugawa victory, Japan was fragmented. No central authority existed. Each domain was essentially an independent state. Lords made war constantly. They formed alliances that lasted weeks. They betrayed each other regularly. Entire regions changed hands after single battles. The country exhausted itself. Then Tokugawa Ieyasu won at Sekigahara. He had the military power to crush his enemies completely. He could have confiscated all their lands. He could have executed every rival lord. But he understood something important. Japan needed these men to govern. The country was too large for one central government to manage every detail. Local lords were necessary for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and administering justice. So Tokugawa faced a problem. He needed the daimyo to govern. But he also needed to ensure they would never unite against him. His solution was elegant. Control them without destroying them. Make them wealthy enough to maintain order. But make that wealth dependent on continued loyalty. And make maintaining that wealth so expensive that they could never afford rebellion. The result was sankin-kotai, a system that kept daimyo wealthy but poor, powerful but controlled, independent but surveilled. It was a masterpiece of political engineering. Consider the mathematics of it. A typical daimyo might have annual rice production valued at around 1 million ryo in modern equivalent. But maintaining 2 full households consumed perhaps 20% of that. The mandatory procession to Edo every other year consumed another 30 to 40%. Gifts to shogunate officials took 5%. Maintaining samurai retainers took another 20%. What remained barely covered the costs of administration and unexpected expenses. There was nothing left for building fortifications, stockpiling weapons, or funding military adventures. and the system made rebellion logistically impossible. Imagine you are a daimyo who wants to rebel. You need allies. But you can only meet with other daimyo under government surveillance. Any suspicious gathering gets reported immediately. You need weapons. But you cannot stockpile weapons without inspectors noticing. You need money. But you spend everything maintaining your 2 households and making your processions. And even if you somehow overcame all these obstacles, your family lives in Edo, right in the shogun's capital. Any move against the government puts them at immediate risk. The genius of the system was that it made power perform against itself. The more powerful you were, the larger your mandatory procession had to be. The wealthier your domain, the more you had to spend on display. Power became its own cage. And yet the system maintained the appearance of honor and prestige. You were not called a prisoner. You were called an honored guest when you resided in Edo. Your mandatory procession was not called a burden. It was called a demonstration of your importance and rank. Your surveilled life was not called control. It was called proper order and hierarchy. The language mattered. The shogunate understood that maintaining face was essential in Japanese culture. So they built a system that controlled completely while preserving dignity. You were never directly humiliated. You were regulated. Your wealth was never confiscated. It was spent on mandatory obligations. Your family was never taken hostage. They were honored residents of the capital. This allowed the system to function for centuries without generating the resentment that would have come from more direct forms of control. Lords accepted the system because it preserved their status even as it limited their power. They participated in their own control because the alternative was complete destruction. The system also created a culture of performance and display. Daimyo competed with each other over the size and magnificence of their processions. Having a larger entourage than required by law became a point of pride. Spending more on gifts and ceremonies became a way to demonstrate wealth and status. The culture itself became a mechanism of control. Foreign observers who visited Japan during this period were astonished by the system. They saw lords with vast wealth and military power living under regulations that seemed incomprehensible. European nobles of similar wealth would have been essentially independent. They would have had the freedom to build, to marry, to travel as they chose. But Japanese daimyo lived in a completely different reality. And the remarkable thing is how stable this system proved to be. For over 200 years, it prevented the kind of civil wars that had plagued Japan for centuries. It created a peace that allowed culture and commerce to flourish. Cities grew. Arts developed. The economy expanded. All because the people most capable of making war were trapped in a system that made war impossible. You are one of hundreds of men living inside this reality. You wake each morning in a castle that belongs to you, but that you cannot modify without permission. You govern lands that produce immense wealth, but that leave you constantly short of money. You command thousands of warriors, but have no freedom to use them. You are called a lord, but live like a regulated administrator. This is life as a daimyo in Edo period Japan. Wealthy, powerful, trapped, and the cage is closing around you every single day. The system did not appear overnight. It evolved through careful planning over decades. And it all began with one man's genius for control, Tokugawa Ieyasu. When Ieyasu won at Sekigahara in 1600, he faced a country exhausted by war, but still dangerous. He had defeated his enemies on the battlefield. But battlefields only prove who is stronger today. They do not guarantee who will be stronger tomorrow. Ieyasu knew that his rival sons would grow up, that defeated lords would rebuild, that alliances would form in the shadows. Military victory was temporary. He needed something permanent. So he began building a structure. Not a structure of stone and wood, a structure of law and obligation. A structure so comprehensive that it would make rebellion impossible without ever drawing a sword. The first step came in 1615. The Osaka Castle siege had just ended. The last major opposition to Tokugawa rule was crushed. Ieyasu's advisors recommended executions, confiscations, the traditional response to defeated enemies. But Ieyasu saw further. He issued the Buke Shahato instead, the laws for military houses. These laws seemed reasonable at first. Do not harbor criminals. Do not form conspiracies. Maintain discipline among your retainers. Basic rules for maintaining order. But buried in those reasonable rules were the seeds of total control. Article 3 stated that Daimyo could not repair or construct castles without permission. Article 7 forbade private communication between domains. Article 8 regulated marriages between daimyo families. The laws transformed every aspect of daily life into a matter requiring government approval. And approval could be delayed, or denied, or granted with conditions. The shogunate now had legal authority to intervene in anything a daimyo did. But laws alone were not enough. Laws could be ignored if enforcement was weak. Ieyasu needed a mechanism that would make compliance automatic. He needed a system where the daimyo would police themselves, where breaking the rules would be so obviously disadvantageous that no one would even try. The answer came from an older practice. During the Civil War period, warlords had sometimes required rivals to send family members as guarantees. It was crude but effective. But crude methods created resentment. It was seen as shameful, dishonorable. It bred the desire for revenge. Ieyasu refined the concept. What if the guarantees were not called guarantees? What if they lived in luxury instead of confinement? What if their presence in the capital was framed as an honor rather than a humiliation? What if the system was so comprehensive that everyone participated equally, removing the stigma? The result became official in 1635 under Ieyasu's grandson. But it was built on foundations Ieyasu had laid decades earlier. This transformed an old wartime practice into a legal requirement that applied to everyone equally. It was not punishment. It was order. It was not shameful. It was proper hierarchy. And because everyone participated, no one could claim they were being singled out for humiliation. But the genius went deeper. The system created incentives for compliance, built into the very structure of daimyo life. Consider your residence in Edo. The law does not specify how luxurious it must be, only that it must exist. But if your Edo residence is too small or poorly maintained, other daimyo notice. They gossip. Your status declines. So you spend money on your mansion, not because the law requires a specific standard, but because social pressure demands it. The same applies to your possession. The law specifies minimum numbers of attendants, but only a fool travels with the bare minimum. That signals poverty, weakness, decline. So daimyo compete to have larger possessions than required. They bankrupt themselves trying to outdo each other. And the shogunate never has to enforce the spending. The daimyo do it to themselves. This is the true genius. It turns social competition into a mechanism of control. You are not oppressed by the shogunate. You oppress yourself trying to maintain status relative to other lords. The system also includes positive incentives that were never present in the old crude methods. Loyal daimyo can be rewarded. A domain's rice assessment can be increased, officially recognizing higher productivity and granting more status. A daimyo can be given a minor post in the shogunate administration, an honor that carries prestige. His sons can be allowed to marry into more prominent families. These rewards are carefully distributed, just enough to give ambitious daimyo something to strive for, just rare enough that receiving one is genuinely prestigious. The shogunate creates a ladder of incremental advancement within the system. This gives daimyo a reason to compete for favor rather than unite in opposition. The entire structure combines legal restrictions, financial pressure, social competition, surveillance, and incentives into a unified system. No single element would be sufficient. But together, they create something nearly impossible to escape. Now let me show you how this system operates in daily practice. Because understanding the theory is one thing. Understanding how it feels to live inside, it is another. You wake in your Edo residence. It is the 5th month of your year in the capital. 7 months remain before you can return home. Your schedule today is entirely predetermined. Morning audience at the shogun's castle. Afternoon tea ceremony with 3 other daimyo. Evening banquet hosted by a senior counselor. None of these are optional. The morning audience requires specific clothing. The formal kamishimo, a combination of hakama trousers and a stiff-shouldered jacket. The fabric must be appropriate to your rank. The color must follow regulations. Even the way you tie the cords is prescribed. You cannot simply dress. You must dress correctly according to rules established decades ago. Your retainers help you prepare. They have done this hundreds of times. Every gesture is practiced. Every fold of fabric is precise. This is not dressing. This is performing the role of daimyo. And the performance must be flawless, because dozens of other lords and hundreds of officials will be watching. The journey to the castle takes careful planning. You cannot simply walk. You must travel with an appropriate escort. Too few attendants, and you appear weak. Too many, and you appear to be showing off, which is nearly as bad. Your steward has calculated the exact number appropriate for today's occasion. 12 samurai, 6 porters, 4 servants. This number signals respect without ostentation. At the castle, you wait in the appropriate room based on your rank. The shogunate assigns specific waiting chambers to different levels of daimyo. Sitting in the wrong room would be a serious breach of protocol. So you wait where you are supposed to wait, surrounded by other lords of similar rank, all performing the same careful obedience. When your turn comes, you enter the audience chamber. You perform the prescribed bows at the prescribed moments. You speak only when addressed. You use the correct level of formal language. The entire interaction lasts perhaps 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes required an hour of preparation and an hour of travel. This is your morning. The afternoon tea ceremony is equally choreographed. Tea ceremony is presented as an art form, a moment of tranquility and aesthetic appreciation. But when daimyo gather for tea, it is also an opportunity for surveillance. Who sits near whom? Who speaks to whom? Who seems comfortable together and who seems tense? Officials take note of all of it. So you perform tea ceremony. You appreciate the scroll hanging in the alcove. You admire the tea bowl. You make appropriate comments about the quality of the tea. And you are carefully neutral in all your interactions. Friendly enough to not seem hostile. Reserved enough to not seem like you are forming alliances. This balance is exhausting, but maintaining it is essential. The evening banquet is the most dangerous event of the day. Sake flows freely. Tongues loosen. Men say things they would not say sober. And officials are watching. Always watching. So you drink enough to be sociable, but not enough to lose control. You laugh at jokes, but not too loudly. You join conversations, but steer them away from anything controversial. You perform enjoyment while maintaining perfect caution. By the time you return to your residence, the day is over. You have attended 3 events. You have spoken to dozens of people, and you have accomplished absolutely nothing of substance. This is life in Edo. Endless performance. Constant caution. Perpetual surveillance disguised as social occasions. But here is what makes it truly oppressive. This is not an unusual day. This is a typical day. Tomorrow will be similar. And the day after. For the next 7 months, your schedule will be filled with audiences, ceremonies, banquets, and visits. All mandatory. All carefully watched. All ultimately meaningless, except as demonstrations of loyalty and compliance. Meanwhile, back in your domain, problems are accumulating. A village headman has written requesting arbitration in a land dispute. Two merchant families are fighting over water rights. A bridge needs repair. Rice tax collection is behind schedule. All of these require your attention. But you are not there. You are here in Edo, performing tea ceremony and making small talk at banquets. You have administrators handling things in your absence, but they have limited authority. Major decisions must wait for your return, so problems pile up. By the time you get back to your domain, you will face months of accumulated issues. You will spend your year at home, frantically trying to manage everything that was delayed during your absence. And just when you have caught up, it will be time to return to Edo and begin the cycle again. This is perhaps the most insidious aspect of the system. It prevents you from governing effectively. You cannot focus on developing your domain because half your time is spent away from it. You cannot plan long-term projects because you are constantly interrupted by mandatory travel. The system ensures that you remain a mediocre administrator, even if you are intelligent and capable. And mediocre administration serves the shogunate's purposes perfectly. A well-governed domain might become too prosperous, too powerful, too independent. But a domain constantly struggling with accumulated problems remains dependent on the system. You need peace and stability to manage basic governance. So you have every incentive to maintain the status quo. The system also fragments your attention and loyalty. Half the year, you live in Edo. Your children grow up there. They attend schools there. They make friends there. They become Edo residents who happen to have a father who rules a distant domain. Their loyalty is not to your ancestral lands. It is to the capital where they actually live. Your wife has not seen your domain in years. She maintains your Edo household. She manages relationships with other daimyo families in the capital. She navigates Edo society. The domain is an abstraction to her, a source of income, not a home. Even you begin to feel divided. Edo is where the important people are, where decisions are made, where status is determined. Your domain is a provincial place where you go to collect taxes and handle tedious administrative matters. The system inverts your natural loyalties. It makes the capital feel central and your own lands feel peripheral. This psychological manipulation is subtle but powerful. Over time, daimyo begin to identify more with their role in the capital and with their domains. They compete for status in Edo rather than focusing on developing their lands. They spend fortunes on Edo residences while letting their home castles decay. The system turns you against your own interests without you even realizing it. Foreign observers who studied the system recognized its sophistication. A Dutch trader wrote in his diary that the Japanese had perfected the art of controlling their nobility without provoking rebellion. He compared it to European methods and concluded that the Tokugawa approach was far more effective. European kings had to constantly watch for noble revolts. The Japanese shogun had built a system where revolt was structurally impossible. The key difference was that European control relied on threats and punishment. The Japanese system relied on obligation and incentive. Threaten a European noble, and you create an enemy who will rebel when he gets the chance. But trap a Japanese daimyo in a web of financial obligations, social pressures, and surveillance, and he will comply voluntarily because rebellion is simply not feasible. This distinction matters. You do not feel oppressed. You feel busy, stressed, financially pressured, socially anxious, but not oppressed. Because oppression implies someone is doing something to you. The genius of the system is that you do it to yourself. You choose to spend more than the minimum on processions. You choose to compete for status. You choose to comply with social expectations. The shogunate simply built the arena where these choices lead inevitably to your own control. And this is why the system lasted for over 2 centuries, because it was self-sustaining. Once established, it required minimal enforcement. Daimyo policed each other through social competition. Financial pressure kept everyone too poor to rebel, Surveillance made coordination impossible, and constant travel prevented anyone from consolidating power. You are living inside a machine designed by a genius. A machine that runs on your own ambition and insecurity. A machine that transforms your strengths into weaknesses. A machine that has operated flawlessly for generations. You wake each day and perform your role. And in performing it, you make the machine stronger. This is the cage built by Tokugawa Ieyasu, not made of iron, made of law and custom and social pressure. And it is closing around you tighter with every passing year. Your castle is a statement of power, 5 stories high, walls 6 meters thick, a compound that covers more area than some European towns. The main keep rises above the landscape, visible for miles. When peasants in the surrounding villages look up, they see your castle dominating the horizon. It is meant to inspire awe, and it does. But here is what those peasants do not see. The castle is draining your wealth constantly. Construction began when your grandfather received these lands. He hired the best architects, brought in master stone cutters from across the region, used timber from forests 3 provinces away. The foundation stones alone took 2 years to place. Each stone was cut to fit perfectly without mortar. The walls were designed to withstand siege weapons. The moats were dug deep enough that no ladder could bridge them. The main keep took 5 years to build. The outer walls took another 3. The interior required 2 more years of work. Craftsmen covered the walls with gold leaf. Artists painted elaborate scenes on the sliding doors. Carpenters built hidden compartments and secret passages. By the time construction finished, your grandfather had spent the equivalent of 10 years of domain income. But that was just the beginning. Because castles do not stay magnificent on their own. They decay. Wood rots. Plaster cracks. Tiles fall from roofs. Gold leaf tarnishes. And every repair requires permission from the shogunate. The Shohato is very clear on this point. Article 3. No castle repairs or improvements without explicit approval. The law was written to prevent daimyo from strengthening fortifications. But in practice, it means you must file documents for any work. Replacing roof tiles. Repairing a wall damaged by storms. Even basic maintenance requires bureaucratic approval. So you file the requests. And you wait. Sometimes approval comes quickly. Sometimes it takes months. Meanwhile, the damage worsens. A small crack in the wall becomes a large crack. A few missing tiles become a leaking roof. You watch your castle slowly deteriorate while you wait for permission to fix it. And the costs never stop. Even when you are not repairing anything, the castle requires constant maintenance. 500 people work here full-time. Guards patrol the walls day and night. Servants clean the hundreds of rooms. Gardeners maintain the elaborate gardens. Cooks prepare meals for the household. Administrators manage the operations. All of these people require salaries, food, housing, clothing, medical care. They have families who also need support. Your castle is not just a building. It is a small town that depends entirely on you for survival. Now consider this. You spend half the year in Edo. For those 6 months, the castle is essentially empty. You are not here. Your family is not here. But all 500 workers remain. The guards still patrol. The servants still clean empty rooms. The gardeners still trim trees in gardens no one walks through. The cooks still prepare meals for a household that is not in residence. You are paying full operational costs for a castle you are not using. 6 months of wages, 6 months of food, 6 months of maintenance. All for a building that sits mostly empty while you perform your obligations in the capital. This is true for every daimyo in Japan. Hundreds of castles across the country operating at half capacity. All maintained at full cost. The economic waste is staggering. But the alternative is unthinkable. You cannot dismiss the staff when you leave. They would find other employment. When you returned, you would have no trained household. So you keep everyone employed year-round, whether you need them or not. The gardens alone require enormous resources. Traditional Japanese castle gardens are carefully designed landscapes. Every rock is placed deliberately. Every tree is shaped over years. The ponds must be maintained at precise water levels. The paths must be raked daily. The moss must be watered and weeded. These gardens are works of art. They are also incredibly expensive to maintain. Your garden includes a pond fed by a redirected stream. The stream required engineering work that cost more than constructing a warehouse. The pond is stocked with expensive koi fish. Some of these fish are worth more than a samurai's annual salary. They must be fed daily. The water must be kept clean. In winter, arrangements must be made to prevent the pond from freezing solid. There is a tea house at the far end of the garden, a separate building designed specifically for tea ceremony. It looks rustic and simple. That simplicity is an aesthetic choice that cost a fortune to achieve. The tea house was built using specific types of wood. The thatched roof required special grass harvested from mountain regions. The interior includes a hearth made from a single piece of carved stone. You use this tea house perhaps 3 times per year when you are in residence. The rest of the time, it sits empty. But it must be maintained constantly. The thatch must be replaced every few years. The tatami mats must be aired and cleaned. The tea ceremony implements must be preserved in perfect condition. All of this costs money. None of it generates any value when you are absent. The castle's defenses are even more expensive. The walls are formidable, but formidable walls require maintenance. Stone must be inspected for cracks. Mortar must be repaired. The moats must be dredged regularly to prevent them from filling with sediment. The drawbridges must be maintained in working order, even though they have not been raised in decades. The gates are massive wooden structures reinforced with iron. They require teams of men to open and close. They need regular maintenance to prevent the wood from warping and the hinges from rusting. Your castle has 7 gates. Each requires its own maintenance schedule and dedicated staff. Then there are the weapons stores. Every castle maintains an armory. Swords, spears, bows, arquebuses, gunpowder. All of this must be stored properly and maintained in usable condition. Blades must be oiled to prevent rust. Bowstrings must be replaced periodically. Gunpowder must be kept dry. The armory requires dedicated staff and constant attention. But here is the reality. These weapons will almost certainly never be used. Japan is at peace. The age of warfare ended decades ago. Your grandfather's weapons saw battle. Yours likely never will, but you must maintain them anyway, because a castle without functional weapons is not really a castle. It is an expensive house with thick walls. The architecture itself creates ongoing costs. Your castle was designed to withstand siege. That means it has elaborate defensive features. Concealed openings in walls where defenders could fire on attackers. Stone drop stations above the gates. Maze-like passages designed to confuse invaders. Secret escape routes. All brilliant military engineering. All completely useless in peacetime. All requiring maintenance. The famous Nightingale floors are a perfect example. These are floors designed to squeak when walked upon. They were installed to prevent assassins from sneaking through the castle at night. The floorboards are constructed with special metal clips that rub together and create a chirping sound when weight is applied. It is a clever security feature. It is also incredibly annoying. Every footstep in certain corridors sounds like a bird, and the mechanism requires careful maintenance to function properly. You have Nightingale floors in 3 corridors. They cost a fortune to install. They require specialized craftsmen to repair, and they serve no real purpose because you face no assassination threat. The age of constant danger ended with the civil wars. But the security features remain, requiring attention and expense. The interior decorations are another constant drain. Your castle contains some of the finest artwork in the region. Painted screens by famous artists. Calligraphy by renowned masters. Decorative metalwork on door fittings. All of this adds to your prestige. All of it requires preservation. Painted screens fade if exposed to too much sunlight. They must be rotated and stored properly. The gold leaf decorations tarnish and must be carefully cleaned. The tatami mats in the formal rooms must be replaced every few years. Even the wooden pillars require special treatment to prevent insect damage. You employ craftsmen specifically to maintain the artistic elements of your castle. Your private quarters occupy the top floor of the main keep. This placement is traditional. The Lord lives highest, symbolically above everyone else. It also means you climb 5 flights of stairs every time you go to bed. And those stairs must be kept in perfect condition. A daimyo tripping on worn stairs would be humiliating. The view from your quarters is spectacular. You can see across your entire domain from up here. Rice fields stretching to the mountains. Villages scattered across the landscape. Roads connecting the settlements. On a clear day, you can see the ocean. It is a view that reminds you of your power and responsibility. It is also accessed via stairs that must be cleaned daily and repaired regularly. Your sleeping chamber is modest by castle standards. A single large room with tatami mats and simple furnishings. But even this simplicity is expensive. The mats are woven from the finest grass. The futon you sleep on is filled with silk. The paper screens are made from handmade paper that costs more than regular paper. Simple does not mean cheap in a daimyo's private quarters. Adjacent to your sleeping chamber is a small garden, an interior courtyard open to the sky. It contains a single carefully shaped pine tree and a stone water basin. This tiny garden requires as much maintenance as some peasant farms. The tree must be shaped by expert gardeners. The basin must be cleaned and filled daily. The moss around the basin must be watered and weeded. For a space no larger than a small room, the maintenance costs are absurd. But all of this is necessary. A daimyo cannot live in disrepair. Your castle reflects your status. If it falls into decline, so does your reputation. Other lords notice these things. Officials report on them. A poorly maintained castle suggests a poorly managed domain. It suggests financial trouble, weakness, decline. So you spend whatever is necessary to keep everything perfect, even when you are not here to see it. And here is the cruelest irony. The castle was built to demonstrate power, to show that you could command the resources to construct something this magnificent. But now it demonstrates the opposite. It shows that you are trapped by your own symbol of power. You cannot abandon it. You cannot reduce its maintenance. You cannot even modify it without permission. The castle that was supposed to prove your strength has become evidence of your constraints. Every stone in these walls represents wealth spent. Every tile on the roof represents ongoing costs. Every decorative element represents obligation. Your castle is magnificent. Your castle is expensive. Your castle is a prison made beautiful. And you are paying for the privilege of being trapped inside it. This is what ownership means for a daimyo in Tokugawa, Japan. You own the castle. The castle owns you. And both of you are owned by a system that ensures the most beautiful symbols of power are also the most effective chains. Your castle sits at the center of a world organized with mathematical precision. The Tokugawa shogunate did not just control the daimyo. It organized all of Japanese society into a rigid hierarchy. Everyone has a place. Everyone knows that place. And moving between places is nearly impossible. The system is called Shi no Kei Sho. The 4 classes. Samurai at the top. Farmers second. Artisans third. Merchants at the bottom. This is the official order. This is what everyone is taught. But like everything else in Tokugawa Japan, the reality is more complicated than the theory. You are samurai, the warrior class. In theory, this makes you the highest social rank below the imperial family and the shogunate itself. Samurai are supposed to be the administrators and protectors of society, the educated elite who govern justly and live by strict codes of honor. The reality is that most samurai are bureaucrats who have never seen combat and never will. Your domain contains approximately 8,000 samurai. These are men who have sworn loyalty to your family. They receive stipends of rice in exchange for their service. They are exempt from taxation. They have the right to carry 2 swords. Legally, they held certain privileges over commoners, though in practice, these were rarely exercised because maintaining productive taxpayers was more important than asserting dominance. These samurai fill various roles in your administration. Some are senior retainers who advise you on policy. Others are magistrates who handle legal disputes. Others are tax collectors, castle guards, scribes, accountants, teachers. Most of them do paperwork. Their swords are ceremonial. Their martial training is a hobby they pursue on weekends. They are civil servants with warrior titles. The stipends you pay these samurai consume a significant portion of your domain's revenue. A low-ranking samurai might receive 50 koku per year. A senior retainer might receive 500. All of this comes from rice production. All of it must be paid whether you can afford it or not, because a samurai without a stipend is a ronin, a masterless warrior, and ronin are dangerous, unemployed trained fighters with nothing to lose. You keep your samurai employed to keep them loyal and prevent them from becoming problems. Below the samurai are the farmers. In the official hierarchy, farmers are second because they produce food. They are the foundation of the economy. Rice cultivation sustains everyone. Without farmers, society collapses, so they are honored. In theory. In practice, farmers are the most exploited class. They work harder than anyone and live in poverty. Your domain contains perhaps 30,000 farming households. These families work the rice fields that generate your wealth. They live in villages scattered across your lands. Most have never traveled more than a day's walk from where they were born. The tax burden on farmers is crushing. The standard rate is around 40% of their harvest. In some domains, it reaches 60%. This is called the nanyu, the annual tribute. Farmers plant the rice. They tend it through the growing season. They harvest it. They process it. Then they hand over half or more to your tax collectors. What remains must feed their families for the year and provide seed for next season's planting. And farmers cannot leave. There are laws preventing farmers from abandoning their land. If a farmer tries to flee to a city or another domain, he can be forcibly returned. The system needs farmers to stay where they are and keep producing rice. So they are legally bound to the land. Not quite slaves, but not free either. Farmers also face detailed regulations on their daily lives. They cannot wear silk. They cannot drink sake except on festival days. They cannot build houses above a certain size. They cannot name their children certain names reserved for higher classes. Even their food is regulated. They grow rice, but are not supposed to eat much of it. Rice is for tax payments and for feeding the upper classes. Farmers eat millet and vegetables. Despite this exploitation, the official rhetoric honors farmers. Government proclamations praise their hard work. Confucian philosophy taught in domain schools emphasizes that farmers are the foundation of prosperity. But this honor translates into nothing material. Farmers remain poor and controlled. The honor is verbal. The exploitation is real. Below farmers are artisans, craftsmen who make things, carpenters, blacksmiths, potters, weavers, sword makers, makers of tatami mats, builders of houses and shops. These are skilled workers who produce the material goods society needs. Artisans live primarily in castle towns. Your castle town has perhaps 5,000 residents. Many are artisans who serve your household and the samurai families. They make the swords your samurai wear, the armor stored in your armory, the tatami mats on your floors, the roof tiles on your buildings. They repair tools, build furniture, maintain equipment. Artisans are organized into guilds. Each trade has its own guild with rules and standards. To become a carpenter, you must apprentice with a master carpenter for years. The guild controls who can practice the trade. This maintains quality and prevents competition from driving down prices. It also means that sons usually follow their father's trades. If you are born to a carpenter, you become a carpenter. Social mobility is extremely limited. Artisans are better off than farmers in some ways. They live in towns with more amenities. They do not face the same brutal tax rates. Their work is skilled and respected, but they are still firmly controlled. They cannot choose their trade. They cannot easily move to different domains. They serve at the pleasure of the samurai class. At the bottom of the official hierarchy are merchants, traders, shop owners, money lenders. Anyone who makes a living buying and selling rather than producing. In Confucian philosophy, merchants are parasites. They do not grow food or make things. They simply move goods around and profit from the work of others. So they are ranked lowest. But here is where theory and reality diverge most dramatically. Merchants are officially the lowest class. In practice, many merchants are wealthier than samurai, much wealthier. Some merchants are wealthier than minor daimyo. And this creates a fascinating paradox at the heart of Tokugawa society. Your domain produces rice. Rice is wealth. But rice is bulky and perishable. You cannot easily store it for years. You cannot carry it to Edo. You need to convert it to currency. So you sell rice to merchants. These merchants control the rice markets. They set the prices. And you need them more than they need you. When you prepare for your journey to Edo, you need money. Lots of it. You cannot pay your procession with rice. You need coins, so you sell rice to merchants, often at disadvantageous rates, because you need the money immediately. The merchants know this. They negotiate accordingly. And when your expenses exceed your income, which happens frequently, you borrow from merchants. Wealthy merchant houses in Osaka and Edo specialize in lending to daimyo. They charge interest. They keep careful records. Over time, many daimyo families accumulate significant debts. Your grandfather borrowed money. Your father borrowed money. You have borrowed money. The debts accumulate across generations. The merchants who hold your debt are officially beneath you in social status. But in practice, you treat them carefully. Because you need them. You need them to convert your rice to money. You need them to extend credit when expenses arise. You need them to manage your Edo household's finances while you are away. The social hierarchy says they are beneath you. The economic reality says you depend on them. This dependence creates a strange dynamic. Wealthy merchants live in large houses in Osaka and Edo. They wear fine clothes within their homes. They educate their children extensively. They collect art. They live better than many samurai. But in public, they must perform deference. They must bow to samurai. They must dress plainly. They must pretend to be lower status, even when they are wealthier. Some merchants resent this. Others play the game skillfully. They make money while samurai perform honor. They live well while appearing humble. Over time, merchant culture develops its own forms of status and display. Expensive kimonos worn only in private. Elaborate tea ceremonies in hidden rooms. Kabuki theater patronage. Merchants create a parallel world of wealth and culture that exists beneath the official hierarchy. Below even the four official classes are the outcasts. The Eida and Hinin. people who work in occupations considered impure, butchers who handle dead animals, tanners who work with leather, grave diggers. These people are essential to society, but considered spiritually polluted. They live in separate neighborhoods. They cannot marry outside their class. Their children inherit their status. Your domain probably contains a few hundred outcast families. They live on the edges of villages or in designated areas of the castle town. They perform necessary work that others refuse to do. They tan leather for armor. They dispose of dead animals. You need them, but you keep them separate. The system requires their labor while maintaining their exclusion. This entire structure is enforced through law and custom. The shogunate issues sumptuary laws that regulate who can wear what. Samurai can wear silk. Farmers cannot. Merchants can wear certain colors, but not others. Houses are regulated by class. A farmer cannot build a house with a tiled roof. Only samurai and above can have tile. Even hairstyles are regulated. Samurai wear their hair in a topknot. Commoners cannot. These regulations serve multiple purposes. They make social class visible at a glance. You can look at someone and immediately know their status from their clothing and hair. This makes enforcement easier. It also reinforces the hierarchy psychologically. When farmers see samurai in silk, they are reminded of their lower position. When merchants must dress plainly despite their wealth, they are reminded that money is not equal status. The system also limits social mobility deliberately. You are born into a class. You die in that class. Your children inherit that class. There are exceptions. A wealthy merchant might purchase samurai status for his son by essentially buying adoption into a samurai family. A samurai who fails to find employment might become a teacher or even descend into trade. But these are rare. For most people, social position is fixed at birth. This rigidity serves the shogunate's interests. A stable hierarchy is a controlled hierarchy. If people could rise and fall freely based on merit or wealth, the system would be chaotic. Ambitious commoners might challenge samurai. Wealthy merchants might demand political power. The entire structure might collapse. By fixing everyone in place, the shogunate creates predictability, control, order, but the system creates tensions. Wealthy merchants resent their low status. Impoverished samurai resent wealthy merchants. Farmers resent the tax burden. Artisans resent guild restrictions. Everyone is frustrated by something. But the frustrations are directed at maintaining relative position within the system, rather than challenging the system itself. Merchants want respect equal to their wealth. They do not want to abolish the class system. They want to rise within it. This is another form of control. By creating a hierarchy where everyone is trying to maintain or improve their relative position, the shogunate prevents unified opposition. Samurai look down on merchants. Merchants look down on artisans. Artisans look down on farmers. Farmers look down on outcasts. Everyone is focused on the people immediately above or below them. Nobody unites to challenge the structure itself. And you are at the top of this pyramid. Within your domain, you are the highest authority below the shogun. Samurai bow to you. Farmers pay taxes to you. Artisans serve you. Merchants lend to you. You sit at the apex of a system that organizes 30,000 households into a functioning hierarchy. But you are also trapped within that system. You cannot change it. You cannot abolish the class structure. You cannot reduce taxes on farmers, even if you wanted to, because you need the revenue to pay your samurai and fund your obligations. You cannot ignore the merchants because you need their services. You are the top of the pyramid, but the pyramid controls you as much as you control it. This is the world you govern. Rigid, hierarchical, stable. A society organized with such precision that everyone knows exactly where they stand. A society so carefully structured that change is nearly impossible. A society that appears orderly and traditional, but is actually a sophisticated mechanism of control. You rule this world. This world rules you. And above you, the shogunate rules everything. The pyramid is tall, but there is always someone higher. And at the very top, the system itself reigns supreme. Farmers, who formed the backbone of this economy, paid their taxes primarily in rice. This rice was collected by local administrators, but was too bulky and impractical for direct use in commerce or other transactions. Thus, Daimyo sold the rice to specialized merchant classes in exchange for coins. These merchants controlled both the flow of rice and currency, acting as indispensable intermediaries in the economy. Despite being governed by strict social hierarchies that placed them low in status, merchants accumulated significant wealth, often surpassing minor daimyo, creating a striking paradox between official social rank and real economic power. The economic relationship between the daimyo and merchants was one of mutual dependency, but also inherent tension. Daimyo faced enormous and constant financial pressures. The maintenance of 2 residences, costly and obligatory processions to the shogun's capital Edo, stipends for their samurai retainers, and the fulfillment of various obligatory gifts and fees. These expenses frequently surpassed the liquid capital that could be raised from rice production alone. Consequently, many daimyo resorted to borrowing vast sums from merchants, deepening their economic dependence and progressively eroding their autonomy. This cycle created a form of subtle economic control, binding even the wealthiest lords to the commercial interests of the merchants. In parallel, land management policies reinforced social and economic stability, but limited mobility. The shogunate promoted wet rice agriculture and expanded cultivable land, but imposed strict restrictions on the transfer or sale of landholdings. Peasants were tied legally to their villages and lands, with little chance for upward social or geographic mobility. Farmers, though officially extolled as the fundamental class sustaining the nation, the backbone in Confucian ideology, bore the heaviest tax burdens and lived within rigid social controls. As urban centers grew and monetary transactions expanded, rice nonetheless remained the central unit of value, taxation, and political power. The Tokugawa shogun's identity became so intertwined with this staple that he earned the moniker rice shogun. Tight interweaving of rice as a commodity, political instrument, and social structuring force defined the political and societal landscape of the Edo period, securing 2 centuries of relative peace and thriving culture, albeit within heavy constraints and growing social contradictions. The daimyo's wealth was thus pegged to rice production, a form of in-kind wealth, but their actual spending required hard currency. This system necessitated constant conversion of rice to money through merchant intermediaries whose economic power rivaled or surpassed that of many lords. Loans and debts were common, making financial dependence a major fear among daimyo, who risked losing both status and land should they fail to meet obligations. Further compounding this were government policies tied to rice production and tax collections designed to maintain social order. The system of rice taxation was both a measure to fuel political power and a means of societal control, reinforcing class hierarchies and limiting social mobility, while ensuring the steady revenue essential for the shogunate's stability. This duality of rice as both sustenance and currency laid the foundation for a complex socio-political system, in which the Tokugawa regime maintained dominance through a stable but stratified society in which peasants, merchants, samurai, and daimyo were bound in intricate economic and social relationships. Within this framework, daimyo had neither the freedom nor the financial independence to challenge the shogunate effectively, ensuring political stability, but at the cost of constrained economic growth and rising financial fragility among the ruling class. This detailed picture of the rice economy and its ramifications offers insight into not only how power was structured and maintained in Tokugawa, Japan, but also why the country enjoyed nearly 2.5 centuries of peace following a long era of civil war and strife. The rigid structure of the rice-based tax system meant that economic fluctuations could have devastating effects. A bad harvest could ruin a domain's finances, leading to famine and unrest, while a bumper crop might lower rice prices, paradoxically reducing the cash income daimyo received from sales. This volatility forced lords to be constantly vigilant and reliant on the financial acumen of their merchant partners, further entrenching the power of the merchant class. Despite these structural weaknesses, the rice economy facilitated a unique cultural flourishing. The stability provided by the system allowed for the growth of arts, theater, and literature in urban centers like Edo and Osaka, funded in part by the wealth circulating through the merchant class. Ultimately, the rice economy was a double-edged sword. It secured the Tokugawa shogunate's rule by keeping daimyo financially checked and socially ordered, but it also sowed the seeds of its own demise by fostering a wealthy, powerful merchant class that would eventually challenge the feudal status quo. While your days are full of duties and rituals, there are moments when the mask slips, moments when you need to escape. In a world where every movement is watched, how does a daimyo find freedom? The answer lies in a private world of leisure. Here, power is not about governing. It is about art, culture, and entertainment. It begins with the most prestigious samurai sport, falconry. This is a privilege granted by the shogun himself. Only high-ranking lords can keep falcons. To hunt with a hawk is to show your warrior spirit in times of peace. It requires patience and discipline. Imagine the scene. It is a crisp autumn morning. You ride out from your castle on horseback. You are not surrounded by hundreds of guards, but a small group of trusted friends. Your falconers carry the birds on their gloved fists. The hawk waits for the moment of release. When the bird flies, for a few breathless moments, you are not a politician buried in paperwork. You are a hunter. It is simple, it is wild, and it is completely different from your life in the golden cage. But even this is political. A hawk gifted by the shogun is a sign of great favor. If you give a hawk to a neighbor, it can seal an alliance. Even in your free time, the game of power continues. When you cannot hunt, you turn to the quiet world of the tea ceremony. On the surface, it is just making and drinking green tea. In reality, it is a deep spiritual practice. Your tea house is hidden in a quiet corner of your garden. It is a sanctuary. You enter through a small, low door. This door forces everyone, even a great lord, to bow down to enter. Inside, everyone is equal. The room is simple, but do not be fooled. This simplicity costs a fortune. The tea bowl you hold might be hundreds of years old. It might be worth more than a samurai's lifetime salary. You spend hours discussing the texture of the cup, the shape of the kettle, the beauty of a hanging scroll. To be a daimyo is not just to be a fighter. You must be a man of culture. Then there is poetry. You invite scholars and monks to compose verses with you. It is a mental game. You must be quick and clever. A bad poem can be embarrassing. A brilliant one earns you respect that money cannot buy. But these are the respectable hobbies. There is another side to life in Edo, a side that exists in the evening shadows. The floating world. Officially, lords like you should not visit the entertainment districts. It is considered below your dignity. But the temptation is strong. So, you and your friends find ways. You travel in disguise. You wear a hat that hides your face. You leave your family crests at home. For a few hours, you are just a wealthy guest. In these districts, money rules, not samurai rank. The streets are lined with tea houses and theaters. Lanterns cast a warm red glow. Music plays from behind paper screens. Here, the famous entertainers are celebrities. They are fashion icons, educated in arts and conversation. To spend an evening with them requires not just gold, but an introduction. It is a courtship ritual as complex as any diplomatic meeting. You might attend a banquet with music and dancing. The sake flows freely. The food is the best in Japan: fresh fish, seasonal vegetables, delicacies from far away. In this atmosphere, the stress of your daily life melts away. You can laugh. You can relax. You can be, for a moment, just a man. But even here, you are not truly free. These districts are watched. Spies are everywhere. If the shogun hears that you are neglecting your duties for pleasure, the consequences can be severe. So you enjoy yourself, but you are always careful. You balance your desire for fun with the constant fear of being caught. There is also the theater, kabuki. It is loud, colorful, and emotional. It is the entertainment of the common people. Officially, samurai should not attend. But the stories are captivating. Tales of tragic lovers and heroic battles. Many samurai sneak into the theaters, hiding their faces. Or they pay actors to perform privately in their mansions. You might support a famous actor, sending him gifts, becoming a patron of the arts from behind the scenes. And let us not forget your garden. Your residence in Edo has a beautiful landscape garden. It is like a tiny version of the natural world, with small hills, ponds, and waterfalls. Walking through it is like traveling without leaving your walls. You might host a party to watch the full moon rise, drinking sake and writing poems. It is a moment of quiet beauty. Yet, underneath all this pleasure, the hunting, the tea, the poetry, the parties, there is a feeling of desperation. You consume these experiences because your real power is limited. You cannot wage war. You cannot expand your territory. You cannot even fix your castle walls without asking. So you channel your ambition into culture. You compete with other lords. Not on the battlefield, but in the rarity of your tea bowls, in the skill of your falcons, in the beauty of your gardens, in the extravagance of your parties. You are living in a golden cage, and you are decorating it with the finest art and the most expensive pleasures. You are filling the empty space where your political power used to be. You are a prisoner of peace, and you are enjoying every expensive moment of it. Look around your castle. Look at the men who guard your gates and walk your halls. These are your samurai, your vassals, the men who promised to serve you. In stories, a samurai is a noble warrior. He is strong, loyal, and skilled with the sword. But you are not living in a story. You are living in reality. And in this reality, your loyal army is your biggest financial problem. You have thousands of samurai. Some lords have 5,000. Others have 10,000. Every single one of them gets a salary from you. This salary is paid in rice. If a samurai dies, his son takes his place and gets his salary. You cannot fire them. You cannot reduce their numbers when you have no money. You are responsible for them forever. Long ago, this made sense. During the wars, you needed every sword you could get. A big army meant survival. But the wars ended a long time ago. There has been peace for generations. Yet, the army is still here. Walk through your town. You see thousands of men wearing 2 swords. What do they actually do all day? A few have real jobs. Your advisors help run the domain. Your judges handle the law. Your tax collectors visit the villages. But there are not enough real jobs for everyone. Most of your samurai are just waiting for a war that will never come. They have titles like Guard of the Second Gate or Assistant for the Tea Ceremony. They go to work, drink tea, and go home. They are an army of unemployed office workers, but you must pay them. Every year, the cost of your samurai takes nearly half of all your tax money. Imagine running a business where half your income pays employees who have no work, and you cannot let them go. That is your life. This creates a problem. Your samurai are proud. They are educated. They are told they are better than merchants and farmers. But many of them are very poor. A low-ranking samurai gets very little rice. After he sells it to buy food and clothes, he has almost nothing left. He lives in a small, old house. His wife secretly makes umbrellas or lanterns at home to earn extra money. This is shameful for a warrior family, but they need to eat. You see the frustration in their eyes. They are trained to be fighters, but they live quiet lives. They practice with swords every day, but they know they will probably never fight. Their biggest battle is paying their bills. Because they are bored and poor, they can be trouble. A bored army is dangerous. So you keep them busy. You invent complex ceremonies. You ask for long reports on small things. You tell them to study poetry and philosophy. You keep them occupied so they do not become angry. But the problem gets worse. Samurai families have children. If a samurai has 3 sons, the oldest gets the salary. What happens to the other sons? They are samurai, but they have no income. Sometimes they are adopted by other families. Sometimes you create small jobs for them, but often they become a burden. Or worse, they leave. They become masterless samurai. They go to big cities. They are angry and well-trained. They are the men who cause trouble because they have no place in a peaceful world. You also have to deal with the groups inside your army. Your men are not all equal. It is a game of divide and conquer, played on a national scale. The shogunate keeps the feudal lords poor but powerful. It keeps the Tozama lords rich but isolated. It keeps the peasants working. It keeps the merchants paying. And it keeps everyone watching everyone else. So you play the game. You attend the ceremonies. You bring the gifts. You smile at the spies in your garden. You marry the women they tell you to marry. You adopt the sons they tell you to adopt. You live your entire life navigating a minefield of protocol and paranoia. You are a great lord. You command an army. You rule a province. But when you look toward Edo Castle, you bow lower than anyone, because you know that your power, your wealth, and your very existence depend entirely on the will of the man sitting on the willow throne. And he is watching you, always. In official records of Tokugawa, Japan, the Daimyo appeared as wealthy and powerful figures. Their domains were listed with large annual rice production figures, measured in thousands or hundreds of thousands of koku. These numbers determined their rank at court, the size of their processions, and the number of samurai they were expected to maintain. On paper, the great lords ruled over rich territories and commanded vast resources. The reality was far more complicated. Behind the impressive displays of status and ceremony, many daimyo struggled with chronic financial problems that grew worse with each generation. The basic structure of daimyo wealth was tied to rice. Income came primarily from taxes collected from farming villages. These taxes were paid in rice, which served as both a commodity and a measure of value. The kokudaka system calculated the productive capacity of a domain based on its rice yield, and this figure became the foundation for all obligations and expectations placed on the lord. However, actual rice collection was unpredictable. Harvests varied from year to year, depending on weather, pests, and natural disasters. Peasants sometimes hid portions of their crop or fled to avoid taxation. Local officials might be corrupt or incompetent. The rice that actually reached the lord's storehouses was often less than what appeared in the official records. At the same time, expenses were rigid and often increasing. Samurai retainers received hereditary stipends that could not easily be reduced. Castles required constant maintenance. The system of alternate attendants demanded massive outlays for processions to Edo, lodging, gifts, and bribes. Religious institutions expected support. Infrastructure projects were ordered by the shogunate. The costs of maintaining status were relentless. When income fell short of expenses, daimyo borrowed. At first, this borrowing seemed manageable. Wealthy merchants in Osaka and other commercial centers were willing to provide loans. They purchased rice in advance or extended credit with the expectation of repayment plus interest when the next harvest came in. But over time, a dangerous pattern emerged. One loan led to another. A bad harvest required more borrowing. A special expense ordered by the shogunate required emergency credit. Falling rice prices on the market reduced the value of what could be sold. Interest accumulated. Many domains found themselves in a cycle where new loans were taken just to pay the interest on old ones. By the middle of the Edo period, chronic indebtedness had become a defining feature of daimyo finances. Some domains lived perpetually on credit. Their annual income was already committed in advance to various creditors. Account books showed complex webs of obligations stretching years into the future. Periodic debt relief measures ordered by the shogunate provided temporary respite, but did not solve the underlying problem. Despite these financial difficulties, the outward display of wealth and power had to be maintained. The legitimacy of daimyo authority rested partly on their ability to project an image of prosperity and control. A lord who appeared weak or poor would lose respect among his peers and might face challenges from within his own domain. So the illusion was carefully protected. Processions to Edo remained large and impressive. Castles were kept in good repair, at least on the outside. Banquets and ceremonies continued. Samurai wore their finest clothes in public. The performance of wealth became as important as wealth itself. This created a strange inversion in the social order. Officially, society was structured with samurai at the top and merchants at the bottom. Merchants were considered parasitic because they did not produce food or goods, but merely moved them around for profit. They were subject to sumptuary laws that restricted their clothing and lifestyle. They could not bear surnames in public or carry weapons. Yet in the practical economy, merchants controlled money, credit, and trade networks. Great merchant houses in Osaka, like the Mitsui and Kanoig families, accumulated enormous wealth. They financed shipping, storage, and large-scale commerce. They lent money to samurai, to daimyo, and even to the shogunate itself. Their capital made the entire system function. The relationship between daimyo and merchants became one of mutual dependence wrapped in social fiction. A daimyo needed merchants to convert his rice into cash, to provide credit during shortfalls, and to supply luxury goods for gift-giving and status display. In return, merchants gained protection for their businesses, favorable treatment in the lord's domain, and connections to power. When a merchant met with a daimyo, he entered through the side door and prostrated himself in elaborate displays of humility. He used the most deferential language. He acknowledged his low status. Yet both parties understood the real balance of power. The merchant held the purse strings. The daimyo held the title and the sword. Neither could function without the other. This situation was not lost on the samurai class. Lower-ranking samurai, many of whom lived in near poverty despite their elevated status, saw wealthy merchants living comfortable lives. They saw merchants wearing expensive silk under their plain outer robes. They smelled fine food cooking in merchant houses while they ate simple meals. The contradiction between social rank and economic reality bred resentment. Some samurai responded with moral outrage, writing treatises condemning merchants as greedy and dishonorable. Others quietly borrowed money from the same merchants they criticized in public. The pride of the warrior class clashed daily with the practical need for credit. From the shogunate's perspective, this financial weakness among the daimyo had a silver lining. Lords burdened with debt were less likely to rebel. They lacked the free resources to stockpile weapons, hire additional troops, or form dangerous alliances. Their attention was consumed by immediate financial survival rather than long-term political plotting. The system effectively neutralized potential threats through economic means. Where earlier periods might have required military force to keep lords in line, the Tokugawa government achieved similar results by allowing the natural development of a credit economy that trapped the warrior elite in permanent dependence. Several shoguns attempted reforms to address these problems. The Kya reforms of the 1710s and 1720s, the Kansei reforms of the 1790s, and the Tenpo reforms of the 1840s all tried various measures. They included cancellation of samurai debts, restrictions on merchant activities, encouragement of agricultural development, and promotion of frugality. These reforms provided temporary relief, but could not resolve the fundamental contradiction. The demands of the status system required heavy spending. The sources of income were limited by the rice economy and restrictions on trade and commerce. The gap had to be filled somehow, and credit was the only available option. The illusion of wealth thus became a characteristic feature of late Tokugawa society. Daimyo lived in magnificent castles, but balanced precarious budgets. Samurai wore two swords and spoke of honor, but negotiated with moneylenders. The feudal elite maintained their position through ceremony and tradition, even as the economic foundation beneath them slowly eroded. This hidden fragility would become significant when external pressures arrived in the 19th century. A system that looked stable and powerful from the outside was actually held together by debt, ritual, and habit. When those bonds were tested, they proved less strong than they appeared. The illusion of wealth was not merely a financial matter. It was a political and social structure. It maintained order and hierarchy. It kept everyone in their assigned place. But it also created tensions and contradictions that would eventually contribute to the system's collapse. The golden cage that held the daimyo was expensive to maintain, and over time, fewer and fewer could afford the rent. For more than 250 years, the Tokugawa system governed Japan with remarkable stability. The shogunate controlled the daimyo. The daimyo controlled their domains. The emperor remained in Kyoto as a sacred but politically inactive figure. Society was organized into rigid classes. The country was largely closed to foreign contact. This structure seemed permanent and unshakable. By the mid-19th century, however, multiple pressures were building that the old system could not manage. Inside Japan, several long-term problems had been developing. The population had grown significantly during the 18th century, creating pressure on limited agricultural land. Many peasants lived close to subsistence. When harvests failed, widespread suffering followed. Peasant uprisings became more frequent and larger in scale. Some involved thousands of participants attacking tax offices, burning records, and demanding relief. The financial difficulties of daimyo and samurai also deepened. As described earlier, many domains were heavily in debt. Samurai families saw their real incomes decline due to inflation and the growing power of merchant capital. Reforms attempted by various shoguns provided only temporary respite. The gap between the official status of the warrior class and their actual economic condition continued to widen. Intellectual currents also began to challenge the established order. Scholars studied Confucianism, Buddhism, and increasingly, what was known as Dutch learning knowledge of Western science and technology that entered through the restricted Dutch trading post at Nagasaki. Some thinkers began to question why the emperor, theoretically the highest authority in Japan, had no real power. Others debated Japan's position in the world and whether seclusion was still beneficial. Then came the external shock. In July 1853, a squadron of American warships under Commodore Matthew Perry entered Edo Bay. The ships were powered by steam engines and armed with modern cannons far superior to anything Japan possessed. Perry delivered a letter from the United States, President demanding that Japan open its ports to trade and provide assistance to American ships. The shogunate was unprepared. It had no military capability to resist such force. After prolonged deliberation and seeking advice from daimyo, the government signed the Treaty of Kanagawa in 1854, opening 2 ports and allowing limited American contact. Similar treaties followed with other Western powers. These agreements granted foreigners special legal privileges and restricted Japan's control over its own tariffs. To many Japanese, especially younger samurai, these treaties represented a national humiliation. The shogunate, whose primary responsibility was military defense, had failed to protect the country's sovereignty. If the government could not fulfill its basic function, its legitimacy was in question. Political opposition began to crystallize around a slogan: "Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians." This phrase meant different things to different groups. Some advocated literal expulsion of foreigners through military force. Others used it as a rallying cry for broader political change. But increasingly, critics looked beyond the shogunate to the emperor in Kyoto as an alternative source of authority. Several powerful domains, particularly Satsuma and Shuurin, Western Japan, became centers of opposition. These domains had been classified as Tozama, outside the inner circle of Tokugawa allies. They now saw an opportunity to overturn the old order. They began to modernize their military forces, purchasing Western weapons and training troops in new tactics. They developed closer ties with the imperial court in Kyoto and positioned themselves as defenders of imperial authority. The shogunate attempted its own reforms, but political divisions within the government weakened its response. Some officials favored opening to Western trade and adopting Western technology. Others wanted to maintain traditional policies. The result was inconsistent policy that satisfied neither side. In 1866, Shodomain defeated shogunate forces sent to punish it for previous rebellious actions. This military failure further undermined shogunate prestige. It demonstrated that some domains now had military forces superior to those of the central government. In 1867, the Tokugawa shogun Yoshinobu formally returned governing authority to Emperor Meiji in a ceremony at Niu Castle. Yoshinobu hoped to manage the transition and preserve some role for the Tokugawa house in a reformed government. However, radical samurai from Satsuma, Shura, and allied domains moved quickly to prevent this. They seized the imperial palace in Kyoto and announced the restoration of direct imperial rule. The Tokugawa political system was officially ended. Not everyone accepted this change peacefully. In early 1868, forces loyal to the Tokugawa house resisted. This sparked the Boshin War, a brief but significant civil conflict. The imperial forces, equipped with modern weapons and supported by several powerful domains, won a series of battles. Edo surrendered in May 1868 without major destruction after negotiations. Fighting continued in northern Japan and Hokkaido for several more months, but by 1869, resistance had ended. The new Meiji government was firmly in control. The new government faced the task of transforming Japan from a feudal society into a modern centralized state. One of the most significant reforms came in 1871 with the abolition of the domains. In August 1871, the government issued a decree ending the domain system and replacing it with prefectures under centrally appointed governors. All daimyo were ordered to move to Tokyo. The domains they had ruled, in some cases for centuries, were taken under direct state control. All land and the right to collect taxes were transferred to the central government. This could have provoked widespread resistance. However, most daimyo accepted the change. Several factors explain this. First, many leading domains were already part of the new government or allied with it. Second, open rebellion seemed futile against a unified modern army. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the government offered compensation. Daimyo received government bonds providing fixed annual income, along with titles in a new nobility system. For many lords, this arrangement actually provided relief from crushing debts and expensive obligations. The samurai class faced a much harsher transition. The new government did not need a large hereditary warrior caste. It introduced military conscription, creating a national army composed mostly of commoners trained in modern warfare. Samurai stipends were gradually converted into government bonds, then reduced and finally eliminated. In 1876, the government issued the Heichorei, banning the wearing of swords in public for most people. For samurai, who had worn two swords as the distinctive symbol of their status for centuries, this was a profound psychological blow. The outward sign of their identity was taken away by law. Many former samurai struggled to find new roles. Some became teachers, taking advantage of their literacy. Some joined the police force or army. Some opened businesses. But many failed to adapt to the new economic and social environment. They had been trained for a world that no longer existed. Discontent among former samurai led to several uprisings. The largest was the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Saigo Takamori, one of the heroes of the Meiji Restoration. Saigo and his followers, mostly former samurai from Satsuma, rebelled against policies they saw as betraying samurai values. The rebellion was suppressed by the new conscript army in a series of battles. Saigo died in the final engagement. This marked the end of organized samurai military resistance to the new order. Castles, the great symbols of daimyo power, lost their function. Some were converted into army barracks or government offices. Many were simply dismantled. Stone walls were torn down. Timber was sold. Moats were filled in to make way for roads and railways. In castle towns across Japan, the physical landmarks of the feudal era disappeared. Socially, the strict class system of the Edo period was abolished. The legal distinctions between samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants were eliminated. All became equal subjects of the emperor. In practice, differences in education, wealth, and opportunity remained significant. But the legal barriers to social mobility were removed. A farmer's son could now attend school and become a government official. A merchant's child could enter the military. The Meiji government moved rapidly to modernize the country. It established a national education system. It built railways, telegraph lines, and modern ports. It sent students abroad to study Western technology and institutions. It hired foreign experts to help develop industries. It reformed the legal and taxation systems. It created a national currency. Within a few decades, Japan transformed from a feudal society into a modern industrial state. The speed of this transformation was remarkable. In 1853, Japan had been a closed country with a medieval social structure. By the 1890s, it had a constitutional government, a modern military, factories, railroads, and universities. In 1895, it defeated China in war. In 1905, it defeated Russia, a major European power. Japan had become a significant player on the world stage. For those who had lived under the Tokugawa system, these changes were overwhelming. The world they had known vanished within their lifetimes. The rules that had governed every aspect of life for generations were swept away. The certainties of rank and ritual were replaced by the uncertainties of rapid social change. The castles stood empty. The processions stopped. The elaborate system of surveillance and control was dismantled. The boundaries between classes dissolved. The swords were put away. The old world ended not with the massive violent civil war that had been feared, but with a series of administrative decrees and financial settlements. The Tokugawa system had been built to prevent change and maintain order. It had succeeded remarkably well for more than 2 centuries. But when external pressure and internal tensions finally overcame its ability to adapt, it collapsed with surprising speed. The structures that had seemed so solid proved less permanent than they appeared. What remained was memory and influence. The discipline, the sense of obligation, the attention to hierarchy and proper form, the aesthetic refinement, the emphasis on education, these aspects of Tokugawa culture did not disappear with the abolition of domains. They were absorbed into the new Japan, where they continued to shape society in ways both visible and subtle. The Edo period ended, but its legacy lived on.